Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
He writes an exceptionally intelligent note at Morgan Stanley. Matthew Hornbach joins us right now. Matt, I got a problem. Everybody from Stolfus over to Opco down to the gloom at the lower end is optimistic this year. Is your Matt Hornbach radar up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me on the show. My radar is always up. It's just a matter of whether it's the end of the year or whether it's the beginning of the year. But the radar is up. And I do think that there are going to be some interesting opportunities in 2025.
All right, let's go there. Matt, global head of macro strategy. That means you can go anywhere, anytime, and look at any asset. What's your 2025 lead right here?
Well, I think one of the expectations investors are bringing into this year is that it's all good and there's nothing bad, and that may be the case by the time we get to the end of 2025. Nothing bad may have happened, but when we talk about things like a recession, obviously nobody talks about recession anymore because it hasn't happened. But I'm actually less focused on the probability of a recession. What I am worried about is that we may have more recession scares. If you think about the past 18 months, we've had one recession scare every 6 months. Every 6 months, the bond market prices in a very aggressive reduction in the Fed's policy rate. Now, that aggressive reduction doesn't come to pass. The economy ends up hanging in there just fine. But for markets, which is what I focus on, we have to be worried about being worried and think about where we end up at the end of that.
Okay, we got a frame out here, Paul. Hornbach was running, he's with Robbie Feldman running Japan years ago at Morgan Stanley. He was doing Japan, doing the yen, doing trading, probably fluent in Japan. And at the same time, he's a CMT. He's like a market technician.
Oh, boy.
Matt, we're going to wonk right now. I got to impress Tim Craighead. He just walked in the studio here. On a semi-log NDX, I have support on my Kleinman exponential moving averages. Are you ready? A 35% drop from here. How extended is the NDX?
Oh, I think it seems pretty extended for sure. One of the things that's also very extended related to Japan is dollar yen. Dollar yen in the high 150s is it's understandable why it's there. The rate differentials are still wide. People expect the U.S. to remain exceptional. But I was just in Japan over the holidays, and it is exceptionally affordable, given where the currency is. It just doesn't make much fundamental sense for the currency to be so weak. And so I would say one thing that I would be looking for quite a decline in 2025 is the dollar yen exchange rate. I think that can very easily go below 140 by the time we get to the end of 2025.
That's a big figure move.
That is a big figure move. And we haven't seen that. They got the yen at 157.70. Hey, Matt, the good friends at Morgan Stanley, are you guys seeing fund flows coming into the U.S., say, from European investors?
Greenland?
From Greenland and other parts in Europe?
Well, I would say there's a lot of flows coming into gold land, not necessarily Greenland, but certainly the dollar does benefit when investors are looking to allocate into either a safe asset like gold or U.S. Treasuries. The dollar is going to benefit. So in that sense, Greenland and gold land are highly correlated at this moment. When you see U.S. interest rates going up, you also see the U.S. dollar appreciating. There's more real return offered in the U.S. And even if you don't really care that much about real return, you can just go buy gold.
One final question. I want to swing it to Japan, but I'm going to stay on U.S. dollar, Matt Hornbach. To me, it's a nonlinear move. On DXY at 108, 109, Are we getting up to where there's a kink, where there's movement off dollar index, or can it be a smooth ride higher in strong dollar?
Well, no, I think if you look at the dollar over the past couple of years, it has been anything but smooth. The dollar has largely been range bound, and that's in large part because interest rates have been largely range bound since the Fed stopped their hiking cycle back in July of 2023. So it's been a range bound market. It's definitely not been smooth. 25 is not expected to be a smooth year for the dollar, but that's where a surprise could come to the fore. Right. Is the dollar could actually could move lower in a more smooth fashion, because ultimately we think the Fed's going to continue to lower rates, and by more than what you see priced into the market today.
Interesting. Okay, Matt, thank you. Matt Hornbach with a brief here to get us started on 2025. He is with Morgan Stanley.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
When you grow up the son of a fireman, you've got that irascible kind of thing. John Bolton, from the very beginning, has been someone of opinion. He's been someone who said it as clear as he can. People that are for John Bolton, his critics as well, see a distinguished career in public service, and he has been very visible in the last number of weeks on the formation of the second Trump administration cabinet. John, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg today. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Sometimes you write an essay, and then you wrote in the Wall Street Journal an essay on Mr. Patel, who is being considered to run the FBI, and line by line you went through it. Why did you put that much energy into that essay on Mr. Patel, our potential leader of the FBI?
Well, being director of the FBI is one of the most important jobs in government, and it's been held by some distinguished people and by some people who are not so distinguished. But the power in that job is just enormous, and I wanted to show why, in my view, Patel wasn't qualified, not in terms of his competence or his experience or his character. I just thought it was important for senators to have that in mind.
The senators are the key. I can state, folks, my book of the year a number of years ago, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, Garrett Graff, The Threat Matrix, the FBI at War. It is a spectacular 500 pages on the complexity of the FBI. John Bolton, do you believe that the president-elect doesn't understand the day-to-day grind of what the FBI does?
Yeah, I think Trump has very little understanding how most of the government operates. He never took the time to learn it. He didn't know much before he became president, and he didn't learn very much when he was president. The FBI has roughly, 40,000 employees, most of whom spend their time working on investigating real crimes or real threats to the United States from overseas. And the idea that you're going to unleash somebody whose main job, in Trump's view, is hunting down Trump's enemies, really demeans the incredibly important work of the overwhelming majority of people in the department. I'm not saying the FBI is free of problems. It certainly is not. But if you want to have somebody come in and fix it, correct the problems, reform it, straighten it up, pick somebody like William Webster, who, when Ronald Reagan appointed him, was a distinguished federal judge. And has since written he doesn't think either Kash Patel or Tulsi Gabbard are fit for the jobs they've held. Pick somebody who's got a background of integrity and judgment, who's going to resolve the problems you're worried about and not make them worse.
John, for some of the candidates or appointees that you have raised some flags on, do you believe the Senate will in fact challenge them going forward in the confirmation process?
Well, I think there's a real chance of it. The idea that the president nominates somebody and that choice is automatically accepted by the Senate isn't borne out by history. I think the president's entitled to real deference in his picks, particularly in terms of what the appointees think about policies. That's what the president was elected to do. But the function of the Senate, the Federalist Papers make this very clear, is to make sure that people who lack character and competence don't get through. Now, we're all waiting after the first of the year for the FBI full field background investigations to come in. That's going to be interesting to read for the senators on the key committees. And then there are going to be confirmation hearings where if senators, Republican and Democratic, are doing their jobs, they'll ask the nominees some hard questions. This is still a long way from being over.
John, from a national security perspective, what do you think the to-do list should be for this incoming administration, maybe for the first 100 days, if not longer?
Well, I think it's a long list. I think the world is very threatening to American interest in a variety of places. Certainly the Middle East is on fire. The Russian invasion of Ukraine continues. The Chinese threat to Taiwan and the South China Sea remain. And I think there needs to be a real focus on going after those countries that have become adversaries of ours and putting in place both the policies we need to protect our interests, but also getting resources. Maybe the highest priority the president has is getting a better defense budget, a substantially larger defense budget. Not to say that there aren't savings that can be had at defense, there certainly can be. But we face threats that are rising around the world, and we've had, over a sustained period of time, inadequate resources to do the job. Our military is way overstretched, and we are vulnerable.
8 ways to go here. Joining us, folks, is John Bolton. Of course, you know him from his many years of service to America. Always controversial, always interesting and opinionated as well. In 1964, at the McDonough School, Owings Mills, Maryland, he ran the Students for Goldwater campaign.
No kidding.
You know, John, I go back to your first public service as a summer intern from the vice president from Maryland, Mr. Agnew. You've seen some White House movement away from the uproar of the first Trump administration. You were articulate about the generals, the admirals that surrounded President Trump in his first term. The military has now seen the Trump process. Can he get the same quality military advice now that he got in January 8 years ago?
Well, I think it's open to question. I think part of the Trump effect is to try and intimidate people, to prevent them from speaking out. I hope that's not the case. The military-civilian relationship is critical for our national security, and civilian leadership obviously is dominant, but it depends on getting straightforward, honest military advice. And if the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the other Joint Chiefs, the combatant commanders continue to provide that, obviously it's up for the president to make the final decision. But they need to tell him what the facts are, whether he wants to hear them or not.
Do you think that, what is your confidence level that that will occur this second time around? Because there are some concerns out there that in the second Trump administration, he'll be more authoritative. He'll have more confidence in his moves, maybe at the expense of advice from others.
Well, I think it's very likely that will happen, but you can't tell until the rubber meets the road. We need to know who the Secretary of Defense is going to be. That's not resolved yet either, and know a lot more about what the other top civilian officials at Defense are going to look like. But I think there are going to be crises that are going to require some pretty tough politico-military decisions very early in Trump's term. We don't get to call the shots on when things in the wider world happen. It could happen on day one.
Ambassador Bolton, one final question. This is for Nick Wadhams in Washington, and it's on the machinery here. I see Iran pulling out of Syria. It's unfair to you because I guess you don't have all the present intelligence, but is it legitimate that Iran is retrenching from the greater Middle East?
Look, Iran is in deep trouble. It's been dealt punishing blows by Israel against Hamas and Hezbollah, two terrorist proxies that were major elements of Iranian power. The fall of the Assad regime in Syria is a third critical blow. I think the Ayatollahs are on the back foot now, and this is a point to press them hard. It may well be the regime itself is shaky. At the same time, we've got to worry about making sure that the new government in Syria doesn't establish a terror state, a kind of Afghanistan on the Mediterranean, something we need to pay a lot of attention to. We've got a lot at stake there.
John Bolton, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to speaking to you again, the former Ambassador John Bolton.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
We are thrilled to start the year with one of the great academics, of course, with the University of Oxford and always forever associated with the Financial Times. John Kay joins us. The new book is The Corporation in the 21st Century. John Kay, thank you so much for joining us. My great theme here is the distrust in America of corporations, and to me, it's the monopsony of it all, the combination, the inevitable transactions that lead to corporate power. Where are we on the cycle of capitalism in terms of the ever greater power of our corporations?
I think we're not in a good place, but I wouldn't put as much emphasis as you do on the greater power of corporations. The greater power of the corporate sector, yes, but the greater power of corporations, people exaggerate the permanence of dominance of industries. It's quite amusing to watch at the moment the death throes, in effect, of traditional US steel, which was, when it was formed a century ago, the larger, by far the most valuable corporation in the world. You were talking earlier about NVIDIA, everyone's favorite of the moment. It's quite hard for me to see how that dominance can be maintained for long enough to justify the $3.7 trillion market cap they've achieved. And of course, the great corporation of the first half of the 20th century was General Motors, which doesn't even dominate the world automobile industry.
John Kay, how do you determine when to get off the bandwagon? How do you determine when to exit Generous Motors? How do you determine when to exit maybe British Telecom? How do you determine when to exit NVIDIA?
It's almost when there's no one left to be convinced. I have a strong memory of early 2000 and going to that Davos conference of the international business elite then. And that was at the peak of the dot-com boom. And I thought, there is no one left to be convinced that this is a permanent change. And I thought, that's a signal that this is the top. And of course, it was. Within 2-3 months of that, the great dot-com.
Do you feel that now?
Over.
Do you feel that now about AI?
I do feel that about AI. I mean, AI is important and will change. And indeed, back in 2000, I was unduly skeptical about the impact that the internet would have on business. But the impact it had on business was not an impact in 2001 and 2002. It was the impact that we're still gradually seeing as online retailing and online information acquisition took over. My life has been changed a lot by the internet, but it's over 20 years, not over 2.
John, generations of managers, executives, board members, investors have been brought up in this concept of the responsibility of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value. Is that still the case in your mind?
What's the case in my mind is that the responsibility of executives of a corporation is to build great businesses. The truth is, if we're saying, how do you maximize shareholder value, which is the product of the profits the business will earn over, even on a pessimistic view, 20, 30 years. On an optimistic view, 50 or to 100 years. No one can do that kind of sum. What executives should be doing is building great businesses. And then shareholder value will follow from that. That's the story of Boeing, which is a good illustration of the problem in the second half of the 20th century. what we saw was Boeing. Boeing, with Bill Allen, who was CEO for Boeing for a time, said we live to eat, breathe, and sleep the world of aeronautics.
Right.
That was what we did. And they built a great business with planes that revolutionized the aviation industry and everyone's lives. From 2000, they took a rather different view. Harvey Stonecipher famously said, people say this is a great engineering business. It is a great engineering business, but people invest in a company because they want to make money. Well, for a time they did make money, but they traded, in effect, the reputation of the company for short-term monetization.
John K.,
actually, we see a lot of private equity people doing just that today.
We have to leave it there, John K., but thank you so much for joining us. The book is The Corporation in the 21st Century. I can't say enough about its thought-provoking tone, why almost everything we are told about business is wrong. John K., and we'll look for that book in the coming weeks.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.
Take a look at the front pages of Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, so we are in day 3 of New York City's congestion pricing.
How's that going?
Okay, so this is how it's going. The New York Post is saying drivers are coming up with creative ways to kind of beat the system. They're basically hiding their license plates. So the New York Post, they spotted a few of these. They're covering like a single digit on the license plate to make it look like another one. They scratch it out. They paint over it. They put tape over it. They use this translucent glue to make it harder to read. They're doing all these different things, attaching those like fake dealer plates that can be taken off and put back on. And then you have the ones with the flake flippers that has the button inside the car that you press and it flips the plate. So it gives a different number. But they're doing all these different things. We are not promoting this. I just want to say that because there could be a $500 fine, if you get caught doing this. But it just goes to show you how it's affecting, so many different people. They go into these extents.
Got a huge response. General Lieber with us yesterday from the MTA. It was a class act. He answered some tough questions.
Yep, he was there. And so we'll see how this plays out. But it seems to kind of be working so far. I haven't seen any major problems, but
next.
So far, we shall see. Day 3 going into day 4 tomorrow. Okay, so this new study, you know that what they call the sandwich generation, those who are caring for the young kids as well as the older aging parents at the same time.
Yep.
So this study says that it's starting to affect their mental, physical health. It's a UK study because this is from the Financial Times, but it really shows similar things that are happening here in the US. Typically those between the ages of 30 and 49. So for some of those listeners who are experiencing this. So it just shows that their mental health is kind of deteriorating faster than others who don't have to kind of juggle both of these different sides of the fact with childcare and aging parent care. And those who did it like 20 or more hours a week. But it just shows that more help is needed for some of these folks. Workplace flexibility also.
And some of it's having
it's a big
kids
debate.
Later. That's
the reason why. They're having kids later. So now they're at this age where their parents are aging, but yet they have kids who are like 2, 3, 4, 5 years old at the same time.
And the parents are living longer. So
and the parents living longer.
Yep.
So
what else
it's
do you have?
becoming a big, big thing. You talked about Greenland, right? So we got to go there. Donald Trump Jr. said to go over there. He made the announcement during his show last night on the Rumble platform. So he said it's a very long personal day trip. He said he's not meeting with anyone in particular. Sources are telling the Washington Post they had this story that he's going to just shoot some video for his podcast. But the foreign minister did say it's an open country. They welcome all visitors. But you know the tension, right? You had Donald Trump who said, Greenland, the ownership and control of Greenland is a necessity. Then you had the prime minister firing back and saying that it's not for sale. It never will be for sale. So a lot of tension there, but he's apparently going to be there today.
The prime minister says the island is not for sale and will never be for sale.
Not at all.
So there you go.
Well, he can show up and he can have the I can't grill it. Olange gevedde brood, mager skinke, Dijon, Wester havos de crème. That's the croque madame. 95 whatever. 95 euros?
Euro,
No.
krona. It's krona.
It's krona?
Some kind of, yeah, Danish
Thank
krona.
you. You're nailing it, Paul.
Oh my
krona.
gosh.
That's the Morgenmad, which I think is breakfast at the Esmeralda Cafe.
Oh, there you
What
go.
is
Nook,
that?
Greenland. It's Paul's going. He's our
Yeah, exactly.
Icelandic
It's a
correspondent.
day trip.
What do you drink with that?
Well, let me look down
Can I
here
get some Danish
at,
beer or
at the
something?
bottom.
Gosh.
At the bottom, there's a long menu at the Esmeralda.
Oh, my
They have the Bugu,
Okay.
the Grönland Slemmenbuff Fra Narsak. I have no idea what that is. Lisa, Mateo, thank you so much
You got
for the newspapers today. Greatly appreciate it, particularly in Greenland. I'm learning. It's
I know.
informative.
I know. It's close by.
Look.
I didn't know it was so close.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.